highest and navigable lake in the world, Lake Titicaca, is facing a drought after water levels dropped below the warning alert.
Lake Titicaca is pulling back. The highest navigable lake on Earth has fallen to levels almost no one alive has ever seen. And as the water retreats across the Andes, it is reopening a question that has haunted this place for decades. Because divers keep slipping into the cold near the old shoreline, and what they pull from the silt has left seasoned archaeologists stunned. These were not ordinary relics. They were lowered here on purpose over 1,000 years ago by people who believed this water was alive. And the closer anyone looks, the stranger the story becomes.
Bolivia's Naval Hydrographic Service declared an alert last month after the water level fell 2 centimeters below the lake's drought warning marker.
The vanishing shoreline. To understand how anything ended up down there, start with what is happening to this lake right now. A boulder up into the thin mountain air. By late 2023, the lake had dropped below the critical threshold set by both Bolivian and Peruvian authorities, sinking past even the worst lows of the 1990s. In some places, the shoreline pulled back by more than a kilometer, leaving boats stranded on cracked mud. And satellite data shows the lake shedding on the order of 100 million metric tons of water every single year. Here's the part that hits hardest. The people who feel it first are the ones who live on the water itself. The Uros have built floating islands out of totora reeds for survey the surface. Lake Titicaca sits high in the Andes, on the Altiplano, the vast cold plateau that straddles Peru and Bolivia. And lately, it has been disappearing. Beginning around 2022, a brutal drought settled over the region. Rainfall in the basin fell to roughly half of normal, and a punishing heat wave pulled even more watcheries, and they have watched those reeds wither as the wetlands dried out beneath them. Scientists point to a tangle of forces behind it, the swing of El Niño and La Niña, less moisture drifting in from the Amazon, and a slow background warming that sharpens every dry year. All of it is true, and all of it serious. But it is not why archaeologists keep coming back. Because every time the water pulls away, it whispers the same thing. There is far more under Titicaca than water. And the real question, the one that has gnawed at researchers for decades, is what exactly is still down there.
We are sad that it's not going to rain anymore, that there will be famine. We are already feeling sad about that because the water has fallen more than 3 meters from what it was.
A sacred inland sea. To the people who live beside it, this was never just a lake. Titicaca sits at around 3,800 meters above sea level, roughly 12,500 feet. So high and so wide that the first outsiders to lay eyes on it called it an inland sea, and for as far back as anyone can trace, it was holy. The Inca, the empire most of us learned about in school, believed they were born here. In their story, the creator god rose out of these waters and called the sun and the moon and the stars into the sky. And the first Inca rulers, Manco Capac and Mama Oclo, climbed out of the lake to go and found an empire. To them, this was the center of the world, the most sacred place they had. Here's what almost nobody realizes though. The Inca were not the first to call this water sacred. They were not even close. Long before them, another people had been coming to these shores, and they had been quietly leaving something in the lake, something the Inca would much later find and treasure and add to. If this is pulling you in, take 1 second and hit subscribe, because the deeper we go, the stranger this gets, and I promise you that every single thing in this story is real and documented. Stay with me. To see what it was, you have to follow the divers down to a reef just off one particular island. The Reef of Offerings. The island is called the Island of the Sun, the largest on the lake, and to this day it is treated as the spiritual heart of the entire region. Just off its shore lies a shallow rocky ridge underwater, a reef known as Koa, and the divers who went down there kept surfacing with things that did not belong. It started small. Amateur divers were pulling odd objects out of these waters as far back as the 1970s. Professional teams worked the reef between 1988 and 1992 and recovered hundreds of items, a jumble of ceramics, stone, gold, and silver, some of it clearly Inca, some of it older and stranger. For a long time, nobody could say what it all added up to. Then a marine archaeologist named Christophe Delaire decided to do what no one had properly done before. Working alongside researchers including José Capriles and Charles Stanish, He ran the first truly systematic underwater excavation of the reef, mapping every object exactly where it lay on the bottom. What they uncovered and published in a peer-reviewed study in 2019 was not a random scatter of lost junk. It was a pattern. The same kinds of precious objects, placed in the same deliberate way, over and over, for generations. These were the work of the Tiwanaku, a civilization that ruled the southern Titicaca basin from the 5th to the 12th century, with a core city of 10 to 20,000 people and an influence that reached across the south-central Andes. And for roughly 200 years, between the 8th and 10th centuries, they had been lowering treasure into this lake on purpose, which left Dallaire's team staring at a simple, unsettling question. What kind of treasure, and why on earth would anyone give it to the water? Gifts to the water. So picture what came up out of that silt. Gold, first of all. Ornaments and medallions stamped with the ray-faced deity, the radiant sun-like figure the Tiwanaku carved into their greatest monuments on dry land. Then the incense burners, ceramic vessels shaped like pumas, the great cat that stalked through Andean religion as a symbol of raw power. There were the bones of young llamas, animals deliberately killed and given to the lake. There were ornaments of turquoise and lapis lazuli, blue stone worked by careful hands. And then there were the shells, which hide the strangest detail of all. Many of the offerings were carved from spondylus, a spiny orange oyster. Here's the thing. Spondylus does not live in this cold mountain lake. It does not live anywhere near it. It comes from the warm Pacific off the coast of Ecuador, more than 2,000 kilometers away. Someone carried those shells across deserts and over mountain passes, an almost unimaginable journey in the ancient world for a single reason: to give them to this lake. Think about what that means. These were not trophies meant to be admired in a temple. They were carried halfway across a continent and then dropped into deep water, where no living eye would ever see them again. The act of giving them away was the entire point. It was never meant to be found. And yet, the single most astonishing object these researchers would ever recover was not at the Koa Reef at all. It was waiting somewhere else entirely, sealed inside stone. The sealed box. In 2020, the same team reported a discovery from a completely different spot, a reef called Ke'akaya, over on the eastern side of the lake, a place no one had ever suspected was sacred. There, resting on the bottom, was a small box carved from stone, fitted with a cap, sealed shut. The divers brought it up whole, and here is where you have to picture the moment, because the researchers themselves described the find as a genuine surprise. Imagine Dallaire out on a small research vessel in the middle of the lake, the box sitting on the deck, dripping and dark, the team leaning in as the cap comes loose for the first time in roughly 500 years. Inside, beneath a thin layer of silt that had crept in over the centuries, sat two objects, placed there with obvious care. One was a tiny llama, carved from that same precious spondylus shell. The other was a small cylinder of rolled gold foil, which the archaeologists believe may be a miniature version of a bracelet worn by Inca noblemen on the forearm. A sealed offering, untouched since before the Spanish ever set foot in the Andes. It taught the team something humbling. This lake is not a riddle they have solved. It is still handing up its secrets, one box at a time. Which brings us back to the question this story keeps circling. Why would anyone put any of this underwater in the first place? Why beneath the water? Now, I have to be straight with you, because the honest answer is so much better than the myth. You have probably seen the thumbnails. A lost city rising up out of the lake the instant the drought hit. That is not what happened. The truth is stranger and quieter. Most of these offerings were never on dry land at all. Nobody flooded them. They were placed into the water on purpose, lowered as sacred gifts into a lake the people believed was alive and listening. That is the entire reason they are underwater. They were always supposed to be. But here's the part that adds a whole second layer. Lake Titicaca has not always sat where it does today. Over thousands of years, its level has climbed and fallen by many meters, pushed by long, slow swings in the region's climate. Scientists reading the record locked into the lake's sediment cores have traced a rise of around 15 meters after one deep low point in the distant past. And as the shoreline crawled outward over the centuries, places where people once lived could quietly slip beneath the surface. That is exactly what the divers found. The same underwater surveys located submerged ancient dwellings, and what may be the oldest known harbor anywhere in the pre-Columbian Americas, drowned by the rising water. Picture that for a second. Not just lost objects, but the bones of a settlement, streets and walls where people once lived ordinary lives, now sitting silent in the cold and the dark. So there are two different forces at work down there. Offerings the people gave to the water, and an entire world the water rose up and took. And once you start counting all of it, the scale becomes almost impossible to believe. A drowned archive. Since 2012, the long-running underwater program on the Bolivian side of the lake has cataloged more than 20,000 objects. 20,000. They stretch across centuries and cultures, from the Tiwanaku who came first, to the Inca who inherited their sacred lake and kept right on feeding it. Layer upon layer of devotion, left in the same dark water. And here's the part nobody talks about. The hunger for what lies under this lake is not new. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived, rumors of sunken treasure pulled them straight to Titicaca. One chilling account from 1541 describes 10 men drowning while diving for gold in its depths. The old legend that the Inca hurled their treasure into the lake to hide it from the invaders appears to be exactly that, a legend. But the chronicles were right about one thing. There really was treasure down there. It simply took 5 more centuries and modern underwater archaeology to prove it. So why did they do it? Why pour that much gold and shell and life into a body of water? The leading interpretation among researchers is that these grand, repeated, state-sponsored ceremonies were never only about faith, they were about power. By controlling the rituals at the most sacred site in the region, by commanding treasure to be given to the lake in plain view of the people, the Tiwanaku elite were proving, over and over, their right to rule. The water was their altar. But what that altar is still hiding may be bigger than anyone has dared to guess. The water remembers. So, the next time you see those drone shots of Titicaca shrinking, the cracked mud, the marooned boats, the families staring out at dry lake bed, look again. Yes, it is a climate story, and a painful one. But it is also a door swinging slowly open. Every meter the water drops, every reef that edges closer to the light, is a reminder that this lake has been keeping records for 2,000 years, written in gold and shell and stone, and sealed in boxes on the bottom. And most of it has never been touched. The people who work here will tell you so without hesitation. Only a fraction of that lake bed has ever been surveyed. The inland deep of a place like Titicaca is one of the last true frontiers left in all of archaeology. And the next box, the next figurine, the next drowned doorway could be waiting just beyond where anyone has looked. So, here is what I want from you. Subscribe so you are here the moment the next box comes up out of the dark. And then tell me down in the comments. If a lake could guard the secrets of a vanished civilization for 1,000 years, sealed in stone that nobody was ever meant to open, what do you think is still waiting at the bottom of Titicaca right now, undiscovered? I genuinely want to hear it.